Hello, Carl here with Sustainability Theory News. We're over at ecofarmingdaily.com, and they have a very in-depth article on different ways to make homemade fertilizers that are, for the most part, organic and natural. They're not salt-based fertilizers like most of the industrial farms use. Now, there's a lot in this article. I will link to it in the description because I cannot go over it all in this video. It would take hours. There is a lot of great detail. But first up, vermiwash, also known as warm compost tea, warm leachate. Basically, you feed worms a fresh compost. I've heard it's good to let that compost break down for about a month with a green to brown ratio of about at least 4 parts green to 1 part brown, all the way to 1-to-1 ratio. And then when they break down, it becomes a great food for the worms. The worms will eat that food, and then it will create a worm tea that makes an amazing fertilizer. And you can kind of tweak that tea based on what plants you feed it. So if your soil is deficient in phosphorus, for example, maybe you have some local weeds that are just growing all over your farm that have a lot of phosphorus. Well, go ahead and break those down into some worm food, and the worms will break it down into some vermiwash compost tea for you. This is a simple method used in the Himalayas. A clay pot with some material, some composting worm food material, with a little hole at the bottom that fills up a jar through a little tube. It can be that simple. You will have to remember to water this regularly. And you can also use the castings, the worm castings, as a great fertilizer. Now, potassium silicate watering solution. You can find plants that are high in silicate and then burn them into an ash and then mix them with water, maybe with a little boron. They say the combination of boron and silicate really helps biological processes. They also talk about potassium carbonate, which is burned at 2300 degrees and sold as a glaze for pottery. Now, I'm not a big fan of really high intensity carbonized materials, dirt, and some minerals because they're not safe to breathe. I'm thinking perlite, crystallized diatomaceous earth, and one of the next ones they're going to talk about is bone dust or bone ash as well. And you can, again, if you're going to do this, make sure you have the proper respiratory gear and you don't do this in your kitchen or whatnot and spread bone dust everywhere all throughout your ducts in your house. It's not going to be good. But you can get bone ash is great for phosphorus. It has a lot of good, it has some calcium in there as well. And you can either burn the bones or you can just grind them up in a stump grinder, for example, and use that dust in your compost pile or directly in the garden. And maybe add a little bit of sulfur too, because sulfur is also a very good catalyst for a lot of chemical reactions. All right, humified compost and compost extract. Compost extract can be compost tea. You can take a couple of pounds of compost, put it in a couple 100 gallons of water, and let it break down. You put some molasses in there as well as feed for the beneficial microbes. But humified compost is when the cellulose and some other matter breaks down into simple sugars and then builds right back up into a thick black base they call humic acid or fulvic acid as well. And you want to have that compost breakdown because the first few weeks of breaking down doesn't have hardly any humus at all. A lot of the minerals will just wash right away. The humus helps hold the minerals and moisture in place, as well as keeps them bioavailable or in their ionized form so plants can easily uptake them. Large scale humic and fulvic acid extracts, they talk about activated brown coal solids. That might be the same thing as Leonardite or Lenardite, I don't know how it's pronounced, but that's one way to get a large amount of fulvic acid. Humic and fulvic acid solution, there's all sorts of them out there. Some of them are powder, some of them are liquid. Liquid's usually the way to go if you want really quick absorption. Homemade fertilizer, sea minerals in ormus, orbitally rearranged monoatomic elements. They act as superconductors, and there's not a lot known about them at this point, but they are found in salt water in abundance. And when you make sea salt on an industrial scale and you're not making macrobiotic or fully evaporated sea salt, then there is a lot of leftover sea minerals after you take that table salt right out of it. So you can buy this in bulk really cheap. I don't know of any sources, but they talk about there's a lot of places you can buy it in bulk. I'm going to look into this myself because seawater, or sea minerals rather, have almost every mineral on the periodic table. It provides a full nutrient composition to your soil. And the ormus helps create more bioavailable minerals and helps the electrical reactions, which most atomic and cellular reactions are based on electricity, they occur more easily because it is a superconductor, nearly 100% efficiency. And lastly, calcium nitrate and molasses. Now, a lot of organic certification programs prohibit calcium nitrate, but he's talking about using it in much smaller doses. The recommended for commercial production 75 to 250 kilograms. He only recommends 2 to 5 kilograms of calcium nitrate with about 2 to 4 gallons of molasses dissolved in about 43 gallons of water or more per acre. That's not a lot, but it can really help the calcium in your soil. Well, calcium is very important for a lot of cellular processes as well, and there's a lot of soils that are deficient in calcium. So before you start making any fertilizers or creating any fertilizer recipes, make sure you do a soil test and find out the composition of your soil, both in terms of the mineral composition, maybe some humic and fulvic acid levels, and total organic matter percentage. Those are 3 very important things to find out. Of course, again, I will link to this article in the description if you want to read more about it, and if you'd like to see more news headlines like this, subscribe to my channel. Have a great day.